On January 3, 1917, a young factory worker in Orange, New Jersey, licked her paintbrush and sealed a fate that would illuminate the hidden dangers of a glowing element. She was only 22, her name was Gladys Feldman, and she was one of the first Radium Girls, the women who painted the luminous dials of watches, clocks, and instrument panels with a paste that shimmered like moonlight. They were told that the radium-laden paint was harmless, that a quick lick would sharpen the brush tip, and that the soft blue glow was a marvel of modern science. What they did not know was that each lick, each brushstroke, was a slow, invisible dose of radiation that would soon dissolve their bones, their teeth, and ultimately their lives. The story begins in the early 20th century, when radium was hailed as a miracle cure. Discovered by Marie Curie in 1898, the element was quickly commercialized. Its eerie luminescence made it perfect for the burgeoning watchmaking industry, which needed dials that could be read in the dark. In 1914, the United States Radium Corporation opened a plant in Orange, employing mostly young women, mostly immigrants who were paid a few dollars a week to hand-paint the tiny numerals and hands on watch faces. The paint, a mixture of radium salts and zinc sulfide, emitted a steady blue-green glow for months after application, a feature that fascinated consumers and marketers alike. The work was painstaking. Each worker held a thin brush, dipped it into a small vial of the radioactive paste, and traced the delicate numbers onto the dial. To keep the brush tip fine, supervisors instructed the girls to point the brushes, essentially to lick the tip after each use. The practice was not a secret. It was taught on the shop floor as a matter of course. At the time, the health risks of ionizing radiation were poorly understood. The only known hazard was the occasional radium fever reported by scientists working with the element in labs, a condition that manifested as nausea, hair loss, and skin burns. For the women in the Orange plant, the warning signs would appear months, sometimes years later. By the early 1920s, a disturbing pattern emerged. Former paint workers began to report excruciating bone pain, especially in the jaw, so severe that it earned the nickname radium jaw. Their teeth loosened, their jaws swelled, and some even lost entire sections of bone. The first documented case was that of a young woman named Catherine Kelly, who in 1922 presented at a local hospital with a jaw that resembled a cracked porcelain sculpture. X-rays revealed a cloud of radiopaque material embedded within her mandibular bone, a hallmark of radium accumulation. Within months, she died of a malignant sarcoma, a rare cancer that would later be linked directly to radium exposure. The medical community scrambled for explanations. Autopsies performed on the victims showed that radium, chemically identical to calcium, had been deposited in their bones, where it emitted alpha particles that eroded the skeletal tissue from the inside. Pathologists observed necrotic bone, hemorrhages, and tumors that had no precedent in ordinary occupational illnesses. In 1924, Dr. H.M.W. Parker, a leading radiologist, published a landmark paper describing the osteonecrosis of the mandible among dial painters, warning that the condition was incurable and inexorably progressive. Yet the factories continued to deny any culpability, arguing that the women had been warned and had signed waivers acknowledging the minor risks of radium. The turning point came when 5 former employees, Gladys Feldman, Catherine Kelly's sister Margaret, and 3 other women, joined forces with labor activist attorney Clarence M. Good. In 1927, they filed a lawsuit against the United States Radium Corporation, demanding compensation for their suffering and an end to the deadly practice. The courtroom drama was unprecedented. For the first time, the plaintiffs were allowed to sit on the witness's stand, to speak directly about the pain that had destroyed their faces and futures. The defense, led by a slick corporate lawyer, tried to discredit the women, portraying them as hysterical and uneducated. They presented a series of expert, testimonies claiming that radium was safe in the small amounts used for dial painting, and that any health issues were the result of pre-existing conditions. The trial turned on a single, haunting piece of evidence: the autopsy report of Gladys Feldman, performed by Dr. William J. Rogers. The pathologist described how the radium had formed a radiation-induced osteolysis that had eroded the marrow, how her teeth had fallen out like shattered pearls, and how her spinal vertebrae were riddled with cavities. He also presented a photograph of Gladys's skull, the jawbone exposed, a macabre tableau of the invisible enemy. The image, projected onto the courtroom screen, elicited gasps from the jury and the press. When the prosecutor asked the defense to explain how a harmless paint could produce such devastation, the courtroom fell silent. The verdict, delivered on August 31, 1928, was a watershed moment in occupational health law. The jury awarded the plaintiffs a total of $100,000 in damages, a sum that, while modest by today's standards, represented an acknowledgement that employers could be held liable for hidden hazards. Moreover, the case forced the United States Radium Corporation to cease the practice of having workers lick their brushes, to provide safer handling procedures, and to fund medical treatment for the affected women. Subscribe to the Autopsy Files for more stories like this.